Evolution of Philippine Constitution. It is defined as a set of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which state or the other organization is governed. Constitution means to be part of the whole, the coming together of distinct entities into one group, with the same principles and ideals. These principles define the nature and extent of government. So sinasabi dito, ang Constitution daw ay ang saligang batas ng bansa na nagsasaad ng pagsasaayos at kalagayan ng bansa. Nakasaad din dito ang mga karapatan ng mamamayan. The Republic of the Philippine Constitution has been in effect since 1987, the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and 1986 Freedom Constitution are the only three constitutions effectively govern the country. At malalaman niyo yan sa mga susunod na reporters.
So next is 1899 Malolos Constitution. But before I start, ano nga ba yung Constitution? A constitution refers to the basic principles and laws of a nation or state that determine the powers and duties of the government, and also provides the platform or base for determining the fundamental rights and duties of the people in it, a written, unwritten form embodying the rules of a political or social organizations of a particular nation and its respective states. In short, yung Constitution, para isa lang siyang batas, kumbaga yun lang panapairal natin. Umiikot sa gobyerno or sa kahit saan, basta kataas-taasan. So, the 1899 Malolos Constitution was the first Philippine Constitution, the first Republican Constitution in Asia. It was drafted and adopted with the first Philippine Republic, which lasted 3 years from 1899 to 1901. The Malolos Constitution is also called the Political Constitution of 1899, and it was written by Felipe Calderon and Felipe Buencamino. Ang Malolos Constitution ay ang kauna-unahang saligang batas. This anchored in democratic traditions and ultimately had their roots in American soul. It created Filipino state whose government was popular, representative, and responsible, with three distinct branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. So ano nga ba yung executive? Executive, he was the head of the state and was elected to the legislative body. In short, executive, ito yung naghahatid ng mga batas sa Pangulo, Vice-Presidente, Gabinete, karamihan sa mga ahensya ng Pangulo. Legislative, it has the power to elect the President and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Legislative, ito yung mga gumagawa ng batas sa Kongreso na binubuo ng kapulungan ng mga kinatawan at Senado. Judicial, the judicial power was vested in the Supreme Court and all other lower courts provided by law. Yung judicial, ito yung sinusuri ang mga batas sa Korte Suprema at iba pang mga korte. So, here is an example of an old photo of the opening of the Malolos Constitution at the Bearswing Church of Malolos, Bulacan on September 15, 1898. So, nagpasya ang Kongreso na bumuo ng saligang batas na siyang tinutulan ni Apolinario Mabini, punong ministro ng pamahalaang revolusyonal. Ang nabuong konstitusyon ng Malolos ay pinagtibay noong November 29, 1898. Nilagdaan din ng batas noong December 23, inaprubahan noong January 20, 1899, at pinahintulutan ito ni Emilio Aguinaldo noong January 21 at ipinatupad ito noong January 22, 1899. It was titled in the Political Constitution of 1899. Written in Spanish, it has 38 articles divided into 14 titles with 8 articles of transitory, unit final additional article. So, yung nilalaman ng dokumento is, the document states that the people have exclusive sovereignty, its state basic civil rights, separated the church from the state, and called for the creation of an assembly of representatives, National Assembly, which would act as a legislature. It also calls for a parliamentary republic as the form of government with the president elected for a term of 4 years by a majority of the assembly. Kumbagay, nilalaman lang ng dokumento is yung mga rights ng mga tao, yung mga pag-aari nila. Ayun lang yung nakalagay sa dokumento.
Hi everyone, I'm Alaysa Baleta. I'm going to report 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. Philippines was subject power. America, the new colonizers of Philippines. United States serves two constitutionality acts. First one is the Organic Act of 1902. The Organic Act is to establish civilian control. The act that authorized two Filipino resident commissioners to represent the Philippine government in the U.S. Congress. The second one is Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916 or Jones Law. It was a statute announcing the United States government's intention to withdraw their sovereignty over the Philippine Islands as soon as a stable government can be established therein. The United States had acquired the Philippines in 1896 as a result of the Spanish-American War, and legislative power in the islands had been exercised through a Philippine Commission, effectively dominated by Americans since 1901. This law replaced commission with an elected Senate and expanded the suffrage to all literate Filipino men with minimal property conditions. The Bill of Rights was also included in the law. The Tyndall-McDuffie Act gave the Philippines greater autonomy and provided for the creation of a bicameral national legislature modeled after the U.S. Congress. Preamble of 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. The Filipino people imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, conserve and develop patrimony of the nation, promote the general welfare and secure to themselves and their posterity the blessing of independence under a regime of justice, liberty and democracy, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution.
Constitutional authoritarianism. When we say constitutional authoritarianism, it is about having a government that is more concerned about people obeying the laws and can be manipulated. By the month September 23, year 1972, President Marcos was proclaimed as the new president. A new constitution has been planning to be held and proclaimed in the Congress. Way back 1965, President Marcos was elected as the new president and was filing for candidacy. The new constitutional authoritarianism has been passed to Congress by the year 1967. Back 1969, Marcos still won the re-election even though there are some controversy of him overspending money and using government funds for his candidacy. Martial law has been declared in September 21, 1972. As on the ongoing new constitution, which is martial law, Marcos really has the power and control of everything. Marcos has been named as an authoritarian president because of his system and with the power concentrated in his hand. In year 1896, there is a nationwide protest that has been held, which is also known as the EDSA People Power Revolution, where people from all walk lives spilled on the street. Under the pressure of United States of America, who usually support Marcos and his martial law, family of Marcos fled and exile and with his election opponents. As Marcos goes on exile, by the year 1986, month February 25, Corazon Aquino was installed as the new president.
My name is Michi Malangit and my topic is Constitution after martial law in 1987. President Aquino declared a temporary constitution or freedom constitution in March 1986, and the permanent constitution was created by an institutional commission. He appointed 48 members of various backgrounds and representation to Constitutional Convention in 1986. The convention, in response to Marcos' rule, restored the big setup that had been dissolved in 1972. But with new measures to keep the president in check, the new constitution was ratified on February 2, 1987. A preamble and 18 self-contained articles begin the Constitution. The Philippines was declared a democratic republican state with sovereignty vested in the people, all political authority emanating from them, o kaya magpataw ng batas sa lahat ng tao. It divides the government's power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The president is the head of the state and the chief executive, but his power is limited by significant checks from two other co-equal branches of government. Maaari pa rin siya magdeklara ng martial law ngunit hindi lalagpas ng 60 days, pero ang Congress kayang baguhin ang desisyon na ito sa pamamagitan ng majority vote. The Supreme Court may also review the declaration of martial law to see whether the conduct was justified by sufficient facts. During Marcos' presidency, ang Pangulo at Vice Presidente ay nahalal ng single 6-year term at nahalal ng malaki sa pamamagitan ng direct vote. The second one is legislative branch. It divided into two houses, Senate and the House of Representatives. The 24 senators are elected at large by a popular vote, can serve no more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms. 234 legislative districts in the Philippines elect their representatives to serve 3-year terms in the House na nabuo ng mga kinatawan ng distrito na kumakatawan sa mga particular na area. The Philippine court system is comprised of the Supreme Court and the other courts established by law, and is vested with the power of the judiciary. The Supreme Court is a 15-member court that is nominated by the President and does not require congressional confirmation. On appeal, Supreme Court judges may examine cases involving the legality of any government, statute, treaty, or decree. Cases involving the question of jurisdiction or judicial error or constitution in which the penalty is sufficiently severe. The Constitution also established 3 independent constitutional commissions. First, Civil Service, ahensya na namamahala sa mga tauhan ng gobyerno. Pangalawa, Commission on Election, ipinag-uutos na ipatupad at pangsawaan ang lahat ng mga batas at regulasyon sa halalan. And the third is Commission on Audit, sinusuri ang lahat ng mga pondo, transaksyon at property accounts ng gobyerno at mga ahensya nito. The Office of the Ombudsman was established to investigate accusations of public corruptions, illegal action by public officials, and public misconduct. Ang Pangulo, mga miyembro ng Korte Suprema at iba pang mga opisyal na protektado ng Constitution tulad ng Ombudsman ay na-impeach ng House of Representatives. Ito ay isa pang pangangalaga upang may taguyod ang moral at ethical conduct sa government. And that's all. Thank you.
Attempts to amend or change the 1987 Constitution. There have many attempts to change the 1987 Constitution. Before we go to the main topic, why we need to amend or change the 1987 Constitution? Kasi kung titignan, it's been there since 1987. Just like any system and documents, there are no such thing as perfect constitution. Even the Constitution of United States is actually not quite perfect. May mga weak provision din ito, especially sa mga sub-party system. Restrictive foreign ownership and lack of efficiency among branches of government among many other. So kung ang 1987 Constitution ay ratified during the Aquino administration, then obviously, nagsimula ang first attempt to change sa panahon ni Ramos. It was then Secretary of National Security Council, Jose Almonte draft a constitution, but it was exposed to the media and it never prospered. The second attempt happened in 1997 when a group called PIRMA. PIRMA hoped to gather signatures from the voters to change the constitution through the people's initiative. But it can only amend the constitution. It cannot change or revise the constitution. Walang enabling law for people's initiative to change or revise the constitution. The third happened per the former President Joseph Estrada. Under his administration, he formed a study commission to investigate the issues surrounding charter change, focusing on the economic judiciary provision of the Constitution. Itong effort na to, it was also blocked by a different entities. So we know naman na yung presidency ni Erap, it was short-lived. Kaya after that, it was followed by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. It was House Speaker Jose de Venecia endorsed Achacha through a constituent assembly. However, this initiative was not successful. since the term of President Arroyo was marred in controversy and scandal, including the possibility of Arroyo extending her term as president. Next is former President Aquino. During his term, it had no marked interest in charter change, except those emanating from different members of Congress, including Speaker Feliciano Belmonte, who attempt to introduce amendments to the Constitution that concern economic provision that aim towards liberalization.
It was about restrictive foreign ownership. Kasi diba sa Constitution, kapag ka-company o corporation, up to maximum of 40% lang yung pwedeng i-own ng foreigner.
On December 7, 2016, President Duterte signed an executive order creating a consultative committee to review the 1987 Constitution.
Isa sa key platform ni President Duterte ang pag-shift to federalism.
Dahil naniniwala siyang it will evenly distribute the wealth in the Philippines instead of concentrating it in Manila.
Good morning everyone, I am Jillian Eunice A. Herunjo and I am going to tackle about the taxation during Americans. So in this era, from 1898, the Americans followed the Spanish taxation with some modifications. They aim to make the Philippine economy self-sufficient by running the government with the smallest possible sum of revenue and create surplus in the budget. The first thing they did is the military government suspended the sale for the opium, lottery, and mint changes for the coinage of money. Next is that urbano tax was replaced by real estate or land tax. Those land tax was levied by both rural and urban places. During the taxation of the Americans, they had problem in collecting land taxes because titling rural areas were very disorderly, and also those people who belongs to upper class or the social elites, they avoid tax payments and the tax evasion was so prevalent to them. Having those problems in collecting land taxes, the government come up with a solution. It is the Internal Revenue Law in 1904. This law prescribed 10 major sources of revenue. So these are the following. First is the license taxes on firms dealing in alcoholic beverages and tobacco. Second, excise taxes on alcoholic beverages and tobacco products. Third is the taxes on bank and bankers. Fourth, the taxes on document stamp. Fifth is the cedula. Sixth is the taxes on insurance and insurance companies. Seventh is the taxes on forest products. 8 is the mining concessions taxes. 9 is the taxes on business and manufacturers. And the last is the occupation licenses. So, moving forward, in year 1907, some provinces in the Philippines, they are authorized to double the fee for their cedula to support the maintenance for the roads. Another thing is that the industria tax was levied on those in the business fields or in the business communities. This new act also imposed a percentage tax on sales payable quarterly or every 3 months of the year. So, after how many years that the Internal Revenue Law was passed, another law was passed in year 1913. So, the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act was passed, resulting to a reduction in the revenue of the government as exports levied on sugar, tobacco, hemp, and copra were lifted. To make for the laws, Governor General Francis Burton Harrison urged that tax receipts should be increased. So, after General Harrison implemented that tax receipts should be increased, new sources of tax were introduced. So, these are the following. First is in 1914, income tax was introduced. In 1919, inheritance tax was created. In 1932, national lottery was established to create more revenue for the government. However, these revenues were not enough to increase the government revenues.
Evolution of the Philippine taxation. What is taxation? Taxation is a term for when taking authority, usually a government levies imposes a financial obligation on its citizens or residents. It is reality that all citizens must be contented with. Taxation does not require consent and is not directly tied to any services. The most basic function of taxation is to fund government expenditures such as buildings, infrastructures, construction and maintenance of roads and etc. It serves rather as exchange for improving citizens' lives through good governance. Taxation continuously develop and evolve through time in the context of the Philippines. We must understand that it came with our colonial experience. Okay. Ano nga bang taxation? Taxation. When you say taxation, it is a financial obligation that income tax withheld constitute the full and final payment of the income tax due from the payee on the said income. Ito ay ginagawang pondo para sa mga pagpapanatili ng sistema ng edukasyon, halimbawa sa publiko. Ang buwis ay nakakatulong din na itaas ang pamantayan ng pamumuhay sa isa at ang pagbayad ng buwis ay tinuturing sa isang tungkulin bilang isang mamamayan. Okay, next. Taxation in Spanish Philippines. Even before encroachment of the Spaniard in the Philippines, Philippines have their own natural resources. Our ancestors were engaged in subsistence economy that is not based on money. Instead, acquiring goods are through barter, payment of the tribute or taxes, are providing labor services to the datus. In some Filipino communities in the Philippines, Spaniard altered subsistence system and imposed the payment of tribute similar of what has been practiced by American colonies. Its main purpose is so to generate funds to finance the maintenance of islands, such as salaries of the government official and expenses of all clergy, people or ordained for religious duty. Okay. Another meaning. It is taxes. During the Spanish period was compulsory. All the Spanish colonies in America and the Philippines were required to pay taxes for two reasons. Okay. The first is as recognition of Spain's sovereignty over the colonies. The second is to defray the expenses of pacification, the act of forcibly suppressing hostility with the colonies and governance then after. Okay. Even before kasi, Spaniards intrusion, Philippines have natural resources like gold, silver, copper, and other minerals, and our ancestors engaged with subsistence economy, which is yung economy nga, that not based on money, instead bartering goods to others na lang yung ginagawa nila para to make their own money, magkaroon sila ng income, and the payment of their tribute or taxes, pinagsisilbihan nila yung dato nila. Okay, next. Spaniards faced difficulty in collecting, so that they introduced the system of reduction in English, contraction, which means process to become smaller community. Okay. So yun. Hindi ko suddenly kasi yung Spaniards is changed subsistence system and binago siya ng katulad ng kung ano nakasanayan ng American colonies. At ang main purpose ng pagbabago ay upang makakuha ng pondo para matustusan yung pangangailangan ng isla gaya ng salaries ng mga government official and the clergy of the people ordained for religious duties. Nahihirapan ng mga Spaniards na kolektahin lahat ng revenue, kaya naman pinakilala nila ang sistemang reduction Ang sistema rendition ay ang process ng pagpapaliit ng community at pamahalaan ng royal authorities. Okay, next. Filipinos who were once satisfied with agricultural production and had to increase production to meet demands of payments. Later on, Filipinos had to pay tributes, half what it were, cash the rest, and reproduce the finances that conquers military force of the Philippines. Manila-Acapulco trade was established through the galleons, large multi-deck sailing ships in the 16th century. It is way for the Spaniards to make sure European presence will be sustained. Once a year, the galleons will be loaded with merchandise from Asia and sent to New Spain, Mexico, and back. This caused improvements to the Philippine economy. Tax collection was still very poor and subsidy benefit given to individual businesses or institutions from Spain will still be needed through the situado delivered from the Mexican treasury to the Philippines through galleons. Subsidy stopped when Mexico became independent in 1820. At nang dahil dito, ang mga Spaniards ay sinigurong ang European presence ay mananatili sa kanila. It is also cause na mas mapabuti pa ang Philippine economy. Okay, next. In 1884, payment of tribute was put to stop and was replaced by a poll tax collected through certificate of identification called cedula personal. Cedula personal was required from every resident and must be carried while traveling. Payment of cedulas was different from tribute. Cedulas is by person and by family, while tribute are from institution, transactions, etc. Payment of cedula is progressive and according to increasing categories. This was heavy burden to the peasants, poor farmer, or low social status and was easy for wealthy. When you say cedula personal, ito yung identification card ng bawat tao noong 1884. So dahil diyan nalalaman
Land ownership in the Philippines under the Americans. Isa sa mga pinanggalingan ng pagkakaroon ng revolusyon o digmaan ng panahon ng Espanyol ay ang pag-aagaw ng lupain ng mga Pilipino, kung kaya't isa sa mga binigyan focus ng mga Amerikano ay ang mapaunlad at mapaayos ang pagkakaroon ng lupain ng mga Pilipino. Dito ay nagkaroon ng iba't ibang panukala, mga patakaran upang hinggil na mapabuti ang pagtalakay sa mga lupain. Unang pinatupad ng mga Amerikano, Philippines Bill 1902, na kung saan binibigyan lamang ng porsyento o tamang bilang ang mga private land at corporation. Tinataya ng pribadong lupa ay dapat lamang may 16 hectares, samantala ang mga corporation naman ay 1,024 hectares lamang. Pinatupad din ng mga Amerikano ang Land Registration of 1902. Kasabay ito ng Cadastral Act, pinapatunayan dito na dapat magkaroon ang mga private owners ng isang torrent system na kung saan dapat ito ay rehistrado. Pinatupad din ng mga Amerikano ang Cadastral Act Survey of Land, na kung saan pinapanukala na dapat ang mga may lupa ay dapat na magkaroon ng titulo at sertipiko. Ngunit karamihan sa mga lupang ito ng mga Pilipino ay hindi na itala. Una, marahil hindi nila alam ang batas. Pangalawa, walang sapat na pambayad upang maparehistro ang kanilang lupa. Pinatupad din ng mga Amerikano ang Public Land 1903 na kung saan ay pinaklala ang homestead system in the Philippines. Dito ay maaari magmay-ari ang mga taong nais gawing negosyo ang pagbukid o farm at gawin itong isang negosyo. Ngunit ito lamang ay nagkakaroon na dapat 16 hectares lamang. At ang pinakadulong pinatupad ng mga Amerikano ay ang Prior's Land 1904. Ang mga lupain na inangkin o kinamkam ng mga pari ay ibinenta ng mga Amerikano. Maaring ito ay private owners o maaring sa pangkaraniwang Pilipino, ngunit ang pera ay hindi napunta sa tunay na nagmamay-ari na kung saan ito ay mga Pilipino. Ito pa rin ay napunta sa mga Amerikano, kung kaya't ang nais ng mga Amerikano na mapaunlad ang talakayan patungkol sa lupa ay hindi natupad at hindi nangyari sapagkat sa una, ang mga Amerikano lamang ang siyang nakinabang sa lupain ng mga Pilipino. Pangalawa, nanatili pa rin sa laylayan ang kapwa nating Pilipinong magsasaka at hindi pa din sila nabibigyan ng lupa at ang huli, doon pa din ang interes ng mga Amerikano sa lupain ng mga Pilipino. Samantala, habang ang Pilipinas ay binigyan ng pansamantalang kalayaan ng mga Amerikano, na kung saan ay naitatag ang 1935 Constitution sa pamumuno ni Manuel L. Quezon. Naibilang ang mga sumusunod na batas. Una ay ang Rice Share Tenancy Act 1936 na kung saan nagkaroon ng regulasyon sa pagitan ng landlord at tenant. Ang paghahati sa pagitan ng kanilang magiging kita, 50% sa mga landlord at 50% sa mga tenant. Pangalawa, nagkaroon din ng regulasyon na 10% interest ang mga tenant ay dapat din magbayad sa lupa na habang nagbabayad sila ay may 10% interest hanggang sa matapos nila ang kanilang utang. At ang pangatlo, walang landlord ang magdidismiss sa kanilang mga tenant. At pang-apat, ang kontrata ay dapat 1 taon lamang. Ngunit, ang pangarap ni Manuel L. Quezon na mapaunlad at masolusyonan ang problema sa lupa ay naudlot nang sumabog ang digmaan na itinuturing na World War II.
Post-war interventions toward agrarian reform. This intervention was created to solve different problems regarding the aftermath of the previous war. This also includes agreements that helps protect and rebuild lands affected by the war. President Manuel A. Rojas, the Republic Act No. 34. During this time, under the administration of Manuel A. Rojas, the Republic Act No. 34 established a 70 to 30% sharing arrangement between landlord and tenant. The 70% of the harvest will go to the person who shouldered the expenses for planting, harvesting, and for the work animals. It also reduced the interest of landowners' loans to tenant at not more than 6%. President Elpidio Quirino, La Sedeco. Under the term of Elpidio Quirino, the La Sedeco or the Land Settlement Development Corporation established to accelerate and expand the resettlement program for peasants. It takes over the responsibilities of the Agricultural Machinery Equipment Corporation and Rice and Corn Production Administration. President Ramon Magsaysay. The La Sedeco that Elpidio Quirino created was later became the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration called NARA. The President Ramon Magsaysay continued. President Ramon Magsaysay also passed the legislation to improve the Land Reform Republic Act No. 1199 or the Agricultural Tenancy Act protecting the tenurial rights of tenants and farmers. During his time, the Agricultural Credit and Cooperative Financing Administration or ACFA was created to provide warehouse facilities and assist farmers in marketing their products. NARA also accelerated the government resettlement program and distribution of agricultural land to landless tenants and farmers. And for the last president, Diosdado Macapagal, the 9th President of the Philippines, also served as member of the House of the Representatives and headed the Constitutional Convention of 1970. As President, his major contribution was to suppress graft and corruption and to stimulate the Philippine economy. He introduced the country's first land reform law, placed the peso on the free currency exchange market, and liberalized foreign exchange and import control.
Good day everyone, I'm Ivan Joseph de Concordia and I will discuss the final resource declaration of policy under Republic Act number 3844 or Agricultural Land Reform Code. But what is it all about? The Republic Act number 3844 is an act to ordain the Agricultural Land Reform Code and to institute land reforms in the Philippines, including the abolition of tenancy and the channeling of capital into industry, provide for necessary implementing agencies, appropriate funds, therefore and for other purposes. And the question is, what is the significance of the establishment of Land Reform Republic Act number 3844 in our country? Source Section 2 of RA 3844. It is the policy of state that number 1 is to establish owner, cultivatorship and economic family size, farm as the basis of Philippines agriculture, and as a consequence, divert landlord capital in agricultural to industrial development. Sinasabi dito na ang mga sakahan ay gawing bilang isang bate ng agrikultura sa Pilipinas at bilang resulta nun ay ililipat ang kapital ng may lupa sa agrikultura sa pagpapaunlad ng industriya. Next is number 2. To achieve a dignified existence for the small farmers free from pernicious institutional strain and practices. Sinasabi dito na upang makamit ng isang maliit na magsasaka ang marangal at malaya na pamumuhay mula sa mga mapanira, masama at mapagpigil na institusyon. Next is number 3. To create a truly variable social and economic structure in agriculture conducted to the greater productivity and higher farm incomes. Sinasabi dito na upang magawa ang isang tunay na variable na struktura para sa panlipunan at mapang-ekonomiya sa agrikultura conducted sa mas malawak na pagiging mas produktibo at mas mataas na kita sa bukid. Number 4 is to apply all labor's law equally and without discrimination to both industrial and agricultural wage earners. Nasabi dito na upang mailapat ang lahat ng mga batas sa paggawa ng pantay-pantay at walang diskriminasyon sa kapwa pang-industriya at pang-agrikultura man sa na kumikita. Number 5 is to provide a more vigorous and systematic land resettlement program and public land distribution. Sinasabi dito na upang makapagbigay ng isang mas masigla at mas sistematikong programa na magpapatira sa lupa at pamamahagi nito. Last is to make the small farmers more independent, self-reliant and responsible citizen and a source of genuine strength in our democratic society. Sinasabi dito na upang gawing mas malaya sa sarili at gawing mas responsabling mamamayan ang maliliit na magsasaka at mapagkukunan ng tunay na lakas sa ating democratic lipunan. This code abolishes share tenancy in the Philippines and prescribes a program to convert tenant farmers to lesses the later on owner cultivators. This aims to free tenants from tenancy and emphasize owner, cultivatorship, and farmer independence, equity, productivity, improvement, and public land distribution. Despite being one of the most comprehensive pieces of land reforms legislation ever were passed in the Philippines, Congress did not make any effort to come up with a separate bill to fund its implementation despite the fact that it proved beneficial in the province where it was pilot tested. That's all. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, this is Eliza Baleta. I'm going to report agrarian reform efforts under Marcos regime. So President Marcos declared martial law in 1972, enabling him to essentially wipe out the landlord-dominated Congress through his technocrats. So what is technocrats? It is someone who advocates the supremacy of technical experts. Agrarian reform is narrowly to government-initiated redistribution of agricultural land, kung saan ang hatian ng gobyerno at ang ng mga farmer. It is an overall redirection of the agrarian system of the country, which often includes land reform measures. Agrarian reform is the rectification of the whole system of agriculture. Agrarian reform is concerned with the relation between production and distribution among land farmers. Tenants are only entitled to purchase their land if they become a member of farmers' cooperative. In this case, it could make the peasant liable to recourse, i.e. to reject him from his land. Samahan ngayon by the Department of Local Government Duties or serve as an education arm, a means of generating savings, and a way of instituting discipline, a channel for agricultural inputs, credits, agricultural extension as instrument for capital accumulation and marketing.
Agrarian reform history. Before the Spaniards came to the Philippines, Filipino lived in the village or barangay ruled by chef or datos. The datos comprised the nobility, then came the Maharlikans freeman, followed by the aliping mamahay and aliping sagugulid. However, despite the extent of different classes in the social structure, practically everyone had access to the fruits of the soil. Money was known and rice served as the medium of exchange. Spanish period. When the Spaniards came to the Philippines, the concept of encomenda, royal and grants, was introduced. This system grants that encomenderos most defend his encomenda from external attack. Name, peace, and order within and support the missionaries in turn. The encomendero acquired the right to collect tribute from the Indios. The system, however, degenerated into abuse of power by the encomenderos. The tribute soon became land rents to a few powerful landlords, and the negatives who once cultivated the lands in freedom were transformed into mere share tenants. First, Philippine Republic. When the first Philippine Republic was established in 1899, General Emilio Aguinaldo declared in the Malolos Constitution his intention to confiscate large estate, especially the so-called fire land. However, as the Republic was short-lived, Aguinaldo's plan was never implemented. American period. Significant legislation enacted during the American period. Philippine Bill of 1902 set the ceiling on tithes, hectareage of private individuals and corporation. May Acture 16 has for private individuals and 1024 has for corporation. The torrent system which the Americans instituted for the registration of lands did not solve the problem completely. Either they were not aware of the law, or if they did, they could not pay the survey costs and other fees required. In applying for a Torrens title. Commonwealth period. Government for the Filipinos. President Manuel L. Quezon espoused the social justice program to arrest the increasing social unrest in Central Luzon. Significant legislation enacted during Commonwealth period. 1935 Constitution. The promotion of social justice to ensure the well-being and economic security of all people should be the concern of the state. Commonwealth Act No. 178 and
Amendment to Rice Tenancy Act Number 4045. Japanese occupation. The era of hukbalak. The Second World War II started in Europe in 1939 and in the Pacific in 1941. Hukbalahab controlled whole areas of central Luzon. Landlords who supported the Japanese lost their lands to patient, while those who supported the Hawks earned fixed rentals in favor of the Titans. Unfortunately, the end of war also signaled the end of gains acquired by the patients. Philippine Republic. After the establishment of the Philippines independence in 1946, the problem of land tenure remained. This became worse in certain areas. Thus, the Congress of the Philippines revised the tenancy law.
Good day, I am Marcos Villar of BSBA 1H, Philippine History Group 4, and I was assigned to discuss fiscal policy under Estrada administration, Arroyo administration, Aquino III administration, and Duterte administration. Fiscal policy under Estrada administration. The succeeding term of President Estrada was too short to effect any change in the tax system. But then, President Estrada, who served for only about 2 years and who assumed office at the height of the Asian financial crisis, faced a large fiscal deficit due to the decrease in tax effort because of unstable peace and order situation in the Mindanao that time. And the administration also had to pay 60 billion worth of accounts payables left unpaid by the Ramos administration to contractors and suppliers. To finance the fiscal deficit, Estrada created a balance between domestic and foreign borrowing. Estrada administration increased government revenue by investor confidence, and the primary incentive for investors is the assurance of peace and order, especially in areas like Mindanao, and the setting up of systems that will guarantee less graft and corruption in government, such as increased private sector in government procurement by the creation of an economic coordinating council that will review all bids for government projects, a measure set in place during the 1998 term of former President Joseph Estrada. Other measures to increase revenues is the collection of trade taxes by ending smuggling, an effort that was successful during the term of President Joseph Estrada. Fiscal policy under Arroyo administration. President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was swept into power through another EDSA revolution. She served as the President of the Philippines from 2001 to 2010. As President, she undertook increased government spending without adjusting tax collection that resulted to large deficit from 2002 to 2004. Because of this, the government had to look for additional sources of revenue. The Philippines' budget deficit at the time was staggering, more so our rising debt. Given the predicaments in the early years of previous administration, something must be done immediately to keep the economy afloat and to lessen its exacerbation, o mapanatili ang pagtaas ng ating ekonomiya at mapababa ang paglala nito. And in 2005, probably the most controversial and yet significant economic reform President Arroyo was supported is the Expanded Value-Added Tax or EVAT, which is signed into law as Republic Act 9337. This law expanded the VAT base, subjecting to VAT energy products such as coal and petroleum products and electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. Also, some items which are subject to EVAT includes medical services, legal services, non-basic commodities, clothing, non-food agricultural products, domestic travel by air and sea. And also selected professionals were also taxed. It is said that in February 2006, the VAT tax rate will also increase from 10% to 12%, which with other fiscal reforms paved the way for successive sovereign credit rating upgrades by the time Arroyo stepped down in June 2010. Fiscal policy under Aquino III administration. As President Benigno Aquino III succeeded President Arroyo, he promised that no taxes will be imposed and additional revenues would have to come from adjusting existing taxes. The administration ventured into the adjustment of excise tax on liquor and cigarettes o pagpapataw ng buwis sa pagbabahagi ng mga produktong itinuturing na non-essential na maaaring kada piraso, kada pakete o kada litro ng alkohol, or the sin tax reform, motivations for which was primarily fiscal, public health, and social order related considerations. Magsisilbi itong hadlang sa pagkonsumo ng mga naturang produkto na itinuturing na bisyo o sin products, lalong-lalo na sa mga pinakamahihirap na bahagi ng lipunan na silang nakakaramdam ng masasamang epekto ng labis na pagkonsumo ng alak o tabako. Republic Act 10351 was passed and government revenues from alcohol in 2015 made up 1.1% of the gross domestic product, and the improvement in tax collection resulted to the Philippines receiving a credit rating upgrade into investment grade status. The sin tax reform was an exemplar on how tax could impact social service, as it allowed for the increase of the Department of Health budget, triple in 2015, para sa Universal Healthcare Program and the free health insurance premium for the poor people enrolled in PhilHealth increased from 5.2 million in 2012 to 15.4 million in 2015. Fiscal policy under Duterte administration. The administration of our new President Rodrigo Duterte promised tax reform, particularly in income taxes, as it vowed to lower income tax rates shouldered by working Filipinos. The tax reform is one of the top priorities under the 10-point socio-economic agenda of the Duterte administration. It aims to institute a more progressive tax system and improve administration. The Comprehensive Tax Reform Program of the Duterte administration. The Comprehensive Tax Reform Program have 4 packages. Package 1, the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or the Republic Act number 10963, or TRAIN, was signed into law last December 2017. Ginagawa ng batas na ito na ang sistema ng buwis sa Pilipinas ay mas simple, patas at mahusay. The tax law is also intended to raise additional revenues to the repeal of several non-essential exemptions to the value-added tax, adjustments in the excise tax rates for fuel, coal, and automobiles, and tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, among other measures. Ang mga karagdagang kitang ito ay magagamit ng ating gobyerno para sa infrastructure and social services. Package 2, or the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, na isinatabatas noong March 26, 2021. The Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises is the largest fiscal stimulus for businesses in our recent history. It is estimated to provide private enterprises more than 1 trillion pesos worth of tax relief over the next 10 years. MSMEs will be the biggest beneficiaries of CREATE through the grant of the largest ever corporate income tax rate reduction in the country from 30% to 20%. Large corporations also enjoy an immediate reduction in the corporate income tax rate from 30 to 25%. Create also provides other forms of tax relief, which are part of a package of economic recovery measures implemented by the government to address the varying needs and concerns of the business sector brought about by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Package 2 Plus of Comprehensive Tax Reform Program is the sin taxes. Ito ay nagmumungkahi ng pagtaas ng buwis sa tabako, alcohol at mga produktong e-cigarette upang pondohan ang universal healthcare at upang mabawasan ang mga panganib na nag-uugnay sa pagkonsumo ng mga tinatawag nating sin products. Another Package 2 Plus is the mining taxes, or proposed reforms on mining and sin taxes, but proposals complement the enacted train law to regenerate additional revenues, make the tax system simpler, fairer, and more efficient, and align with the President Duterte's priority programs on social and environmental protections. Package 3 of Comprehensive Tax Reform Program is the Real Property Valuation Reform. It aims to promote the development of a just, equitable, and efficient real property valuation systems. It will broaden the tax base used for property-related taxes of the national and local governments, thereby increasing government revenues without increasing the existing tax rates or devising new tax impositions. Package 4, or the Passive Income and Financial Intermediary Taxation Act, or PFITA. It complements the recently passed Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Act by making passive income and financial intermediary taxes simpler, fairer, more efficient, and more competitively regionally. The last one is the Motor Vehicle Users Charge. The Motor Vehicle Users Charge, or MVUC, or Package 1C of the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program, was introduced to provide adequate funding for the maintenance of national and provincial roads. It also aims to address air pollution for motor vehicles. The present income tax scheme of the country is the second highest in Southeast Asia. It is hoped that reforms in the country's tax policy will result into the much desired economic development that will be felt even by the lowest classes in the society. And that's all.
Nalalaman kung diyan din nalalaman yung in increasing of categories na nalalaman yung ano lang ba yung maybe may ibibigay na tax doon, kung gaano kalaki o gaano kababa rather. Chinese in the Philippines will also made to pay their cedulas mas malaki ang binabayaran ng Chinese kaysa sa Filipino. Two direct taxes were added in 1878 imposed on urban incomes. Urban is a tax on annual rental values earned urban real estate, and industria is a tax on salaries, dividends, and profits. These taxes were universal and affected all kinds of economic activity except agriculture. Direct taxes such as custom duties were imposed on exports and imports, further make revenue. Noong 1878, doon na nagsimulang maningil ng, ayun nga, yung tatawag na tax ng sa mga renta doon sa isang store. Kasi need nila yun eh. Required silang magbayad. Forced labor was character of Spanish colonial taxation in the Philippines through the poll system practice employed by Spanish colonizers that required forced labor of all Filipino males aged 16 to 60 years old, which resulted to increased death rate and flight to the mountains, resulting in decrease in population in the 17th century. Males are required to provide labor for 40 days a year, reduced to 15 days a year in 1884. They may opt out by paying falas, which costs about 3 pesos per annum, which are also laws of corruption because it was collected at the municipal level known as kaidos or trappings. Ang bawat manggagawa that time is nire-record nilang magtrabaho para makabayad na rin ng taxes. Yun. Kasi that time, Filipino males ay nire-record nila na magtrabaho na ng simula 16 years old to 60 years old. Kaso, nagre-result siya ng death rate. And ang males also kasi nire-record nila na 40 days a year na nag-labor, reduced to 15 days a year in 1884. Kasi required silang magbayad ng annum, which is per year nga, na 3 pesos. Okay, next. Taxation in the Philippines during Spanish colonial period causes heavy burden to the Philippines. Corruption of the principals or the former datus and local elites were evident and co-opted by the Spaniards to subjugate and control the natives on their behalf. Those government officials such as cabeza de barangay or alcaides in the local government were able to reach themselves by pocketing tributes and falas, while the peasants were left to be abused. Taxation appeared progressive, but the disparity between the less tax principal and the heavy tax peasants made the rich richer, poorer and poorer. Yun. At yun lamang po. By the way, my name is Rika Yumol. Okay po, next reporter.
Fiscal year. The impact of the war on the Philippine economy was effectively disparate. Manila was razed to the ground while the rest of the Philippines was relatively untouched. The U.S. may have declared the Philippines independent, but as the country needed rehabilitation from the U.S., the dependency of the Philippines to the Americans was an opportunity to be taken advantage. The economic situation was so problematic in year 1949. There was severe lack of funds in many aspects of governance, such as the military and education sectors. No efforts were made to improve tax collection, and the U.S. advised the adoption of direct taxation. So, ang mga nangyayari sa fiscal year ay yung mga epekto sa Pilipinas kung paano ito magkahiwalay or paano ito ihiwalay, at yung pagkawasak ng lupa sa Maynila at yung ibang yung mga ibang bahagi naman ng Maynila ay hindi pa gaano nagagalaw. At yung din yung sa pagsamantala ng mga Amerikano sa Pilipinas dahil sa kakulangan at pangangailangan ng rehabilitasyon, at tayo ay nanghingi noon sa mga taga-US. At isa na din dito ang kalagayang pang-ekonomiya, at nagkaproblema noong taong 1949. At nagkaroon ng matinding pondo sa maraming aspeto ng pamamahala tulad ng militar at sektor na edukasyon. So nagkaroon din tayo ng pangangailangan. So parang naubusan tayo para maibigay ito or mabigyan ang mga military at mga pang-edukasyon na mga pangangailangan. Walang mga pagsisikap na ginawa upang mapabuti ang pangolekta ng buwis, at pinayuhan ng US ang pagpapatibay ng direktang pagpapabuwis. Elpidio Quirino. The impetus of economic growth
came during the time of President Elpidio Quirino through the implementation of import and exchange controls. This policy allowed expansion of viable manufacturing sector that reduced economic dependence on imports. New tax measures were also passed, includes corporate tax rate that increased government revenues. So, nung naging Pangulo na si Elpidio Quirino, siya ay nagpatupad ng paglabas-masok ng mga produkto o di kaya siya yung nagpatupad ng mga kontrol tungkol sa paglabas at pagpasok ng mga produkto. At pinayagan niya rin na mapalawak mabuhay ang mga sektong pagmamanupaktura na nagpababa ng pag-asa sa ekonomiya sa mga import. At ipinasa din ang mga bagong panukala sa buwis kasama ang mga rate ng buwis sa korporasyon na nagpapataas ng mga kita ng gobyerno. While succeeding presidencies of Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal promised to study the tax structure and policy of the country to make way for more robust and efficient tax collection scheme. Post-war fiscal policy remained regressive. It gives burden to lower class while the landed elite who held business interests were in Congress to ensure that taxes will not be levied to them. The period of the post-war public saw a rise in corruption. From 1959 to 1968, Congress did not pass any tax legislation, which resulted to the interest of Filipino businessmen in Congress manifest in many instances, such as rejection of taxes on imports. Omnibus Tax Law of 1969 did not increase the ratio of income tax to general tax revenue. Collection of taxes remained poor. Tax structure is still problematic and much of public funds were lost to corruption, which lead government incapable of funding projects toward development. Ang mga sunod na mga pangulo na sina Magsaysay, Garcia, at Macapagal ay nangako upang pag-aralan ang struktura ng patakaran ng buwis ng bansa, upang bigyan ng daan ang mas matatag na mahusay na pamamaraan ng pangolekta ng buwis, at nanatiling regressive ang patakarang piskal pagkatapos ng digmaan. Nagbibigay ito ng pasanin sa mas mababang uri habang nasa Kongreso ang mga landed elite o yung mga taong may kaya na may hawak na interes sa negosyo upang matiyak na hindi mapapataw ang buwis sa kanila. So, nagbigay din ito ng pagsusuri tungkol sa mga may kayang mga tao na upang hindi ito mapataw sa buwis nila. At ang panahon ng Republika pagkatapos ng digmaan ay tumaas ang korupsyon. So, tumaas din ang korupsyon nung sila ay namamahala na sa Pilipinas. At mula noong 1959 to 1968, ang Kongreso ay hindi nagpasa ng anumang batas sa buwis na nagresulta sa interes ng mga Pilipinong negosyante sa Kongreso na nahayag sa maraming pagkataon tulad ng pagtanggi sa mga buwis sa mga import. So, nung mga taon na ito ay hindi na nagpasa ng batas tungkol sa buwis. So, ayun na nga. At ito ay nagka-resulta or naging resulta nito ay ang pag-interest ng mga Pilipinong negosyante sa mga kongreso. So, ang ipinatupad nilang patakaran na Omnibus Tax Law ng 1968, ito ay hindi pinataas ang tax or income tax sa pangkalahatang kita ng buwis. Kaya, mas nahirapan ang bansa at problemado sa mga ekstruktura ng buwis at malaking bahagi ng pampublikong pundo ang nawala sa katiwalian na naging dahilan ng kawalan ng kakayahan ng gobyerno na punduhan ang mga proyekto tungo sa kaunlaran. So, ayun, nung hindi na lumaki yung mga tax ay nagka-problema na sa mga estruktura na ipapatupad or yung at wala nang pondo para sa mga pampubliko na mga gawain.
Fiscal year. Ferdinand Marcos. Ferdinand Emmanuel Adrian Marcos Sr. was a Filipino politician, lawyer, and a kleptocrat who served as 10th President of the Philippines from 1965 to 1986. Looking at Marcos's background, PCGG, or the Presidential Commission on Good Government, says that Marcos' family stole 5 to 10 billion US dollars from Central Bank of the Philippines. He and his wife Imelda Marcos were holders of the Guinness World Record for greatest robbery of a government. Tax remained regressive. The tax system under the Marcos administration was generally regressive, as it was heavily dependent on indirect taxes. Indirect taxes and international trade taxes accounted for about 35% of total tax revenue, while direct taxes only accounted for about 25%. Maria Corazon Sumulong Cojuangco Aquino, popularly known as Cory Aquino, was a Filipino politician who served as the 11th President of the Philippines from 1986 to 1992. Corazon Aquino was the most prominent figure of the 1986 and People Power Revolution, which ended the two-decade rule of President Ferdinand Marcos and led to the establishment of the current democratic, faced Philippine Republic. She was also the first female president and was married to Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. Recognizing the inherent weaknesses of the tax system of Ferdinand Marcos, Cory Aquino, a few months after she took power in 1986, reformed the tax system. Operating under a revolutionary government, Aquino exercised both executive and legislative powers, and consequently succeeded in overhauling the weak tax system with virtually no resistance. The aim of the 1986 tax reform program was to simplify the tax system, make revenues more responsive to economic activity, promote horizontal equity, and promote growth by correcting existing taxes that impaired business incentives. The VAT law was signed in 1986 and put to effect in 1988. Value-added tax is collected on a product at every stage of its production, during which value is added to it from its initial production to the point of the sale. The amount of VAT that a user pays is based on the cost of the product, minus the cost of the materials that have already been taxed at a previous stage. A major tax reform in the tax system introduced under the term of Aquino was the introduction of value-added tax, or VAT, with the following features. I have listed here the features of the VAT, in total of 6 features, and all of them are very understandable. Fidel Valdez Ramos, popularly known as FVR or Eddie, is a retired Filipino general and politician who served as the 12th President of the Philippines from 1992 to 1998. He is the only career military officer who reached the rank of 5-star general, who rose from second lieutenant up to commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The Ramos administration had budget surpluses for 4 of its 6 years in power. The government benefited from the massive sale of government assets and continued to benefit from the 1986 TRP, or the Tax Reform Program. Comprehensive tax reform program was implemented to make the system broad-based, simple, and with reasonable tax rates, minimize tax avoidance allowed by existing flaws and loopholes in the system, encourage payments by increasing tax exemptions levels, and lastly, rationalize the grant of tax incentives, which was estimated to be worth 31.7 billion pesos in 1994.